They said Rachel's hands had brought 63 children into the world, white and black alike, and never once had she lost a mother to fever or blood. She knew herbs, prayers, and the exact pressure to apply when a birth went wrong. The Hartwell family trusted her completely. That trust in the end became their miscalculation. By 1843, Rachel had served the Hartwell plantation in southern Georgia for 52 years. Her back curved like a question mark. Her fingers moved slowly through basins of water, wringing cloth, mixing tinctures, preparing the birthing room with the same ritual precision she'd learned as a girl. She slept in a small cabin near the main house, close enough to hear the bell when labor began, far enough to remember she owned nothing, not her time, not her body, not the daughter they'd sold downriver 15 years prior. The Hartwell sons, Thomas, 24, and William, 22, had inherited their father's cruelty, but lacked his caution. They drank often. They spoke carelessly. On a July evening, drunk on corn whiskey, Thomas told Rachel to prepare a tonic for his wife's nerves. When Rachel hesitated, the mixture he described could harm a pregnant woman, Thomas struck her across the mouth with the back of his hand. "You'll do as you're told, old woman," he said. His brother laughed. Then Thomas added the words that sealed them both. "Just like we sold your girl, should have drowned her when she was born, saved us the trouble." Rachel's daughter had been named Esther. She'd been 16 when the Hartwells sold her to a cotton broker heading west. Rachel never learned where she ended up. For 15 years, she carried that silence like a stone in her chest. Now standing in the dim kitchen with blood on her lip, she felt the stone crack open. The Hartwell house smelled of beeswax, tobacco, and old wood. The well behind it was deep and cold, fed by an underground spring. Rachel knew every corner of that house, which floorboards creaked, which doors locked from the outside, which windows the brothers left open when they drank late into the night. She did not speak of vengeance. She simply began to prepare. Chapter 1. The Oath of Silence. Rachel woke before dawn, as she always did. The August heat already pressed against the cabin walls, thick and patient. She washed her face in the basin, dressed in the same worn linen she'd mended 100 times, and walked the dirt path to the main house. Her feet remembered the route in the dark. Inside the kitchen, she lit the stove and began the morning work. Cornmeal porridge, coffee for the White family, biscuits cooling on the counter. The house slept. Upstairs, Thomas and William lay in their beds, their wives beside them, the children in adjoining rooms. Rachel moved through the routine without thought, her hands performing the motions her body had learned decades ago. But today, she noticed things differently. The well bucket hung on its iron hook, the rope frayed but strong. The cistern in the cellar held rainwater for washing. The back door to the nursery, where the Hartwell grandsons slept, latched from the outside with a simple wooden bar. The brothers kept laudanum in the medicine cabinet for their wives' headaches, measured in careful doses. Rachel had mixed it herself many times, knew the earthy bitterness, the way it dissolved in warm milk. She stood at the kitchen window looking out at the well. The stone rim was smooth from years of use. The water below was black and cold, deep enough that a bucket took 5 full seconds to hit the surface. She could hear it sometimes at night, the echo of water against stone. Thomas appeared in the doorway barefoot, his shirt unbuttoned. "Coffee," he said, not looking at her. Rachel poured it without a word, set the cup on the table. He drank, staring out at the fields where the field hands were already moving through the rows. "My wife says the baby's kicking hard," he said. "You'll check on her this afternoon." "Yes, sir." He left. Rachel stood in the kitchen, the morning light crawling across the floorboards. She thought of Esther, the way she'd hummed while working, the small scar on her wrist from a kitchen burn, the last time Rachel had held her before the broker's wagon rolled away. That evening, Rachel walked to the quarters after supper. She found Samuel, the carpenter who repaired the cabin, sitting outside his door whittling a piece of cedar. He was older than Rachel, his hands scarred from decades of labor. "You hear what happened to Marcus?" Samuel asked quietly. Marcus had been whipped 2 days prior for speaking back to William. 20 lashes. Rachel had tended his wounds afterward, applied salve, said nothing. "I heard," Rachel said. Samuel studied her face in the dwindling light. "You look like you're carrying something heavy." Rachel sat on the step beside him. The evening air smelled of wood smoke and earth. "I delivered both those boys," she said softly. "Held them when they were still wet from the womb. Wrapped them in linen. Their mother thanked me." Samuel waited. "They sold my Esther," Rachel continued. 15 years ago. I begged them not to. Got down on my knees in that parlor. Thomas was 12 years old, watching. He laughed then too." Samuel's knife stopped moving. He looked at the cedar in his hands, then at Rachel. "What are you thinking about doing?" Rachel stood slowly, her knees aching. "I'm thinking about water," she said. "How deep it is. How cold." She walked back to her cabin. Samuel did not follow. He understood that some conversations happened in silence, that some plans were not spoken aloud but simply recognized, the way one recognizes a storm by the taste of the air. That night, Rachel did not sleep. She lay on her narrow bed, listening to the cicadas, thinking about the well, the nursery door, the laudanum, and the weight of small bodies. How much they resisted, how quickly they surrendered. Chapter 2. The Preparation. Rachel moved through the following days like a woman already dead. She cooked, cleaned, mixed tonics, attended to the pregnant wives and sick children. No one noticed the change in her. Enslaved people learned early to hide their thoughts behind blank faces, to perform obedience while their minds wandered elsewhere. She began collecting small things: a length of cotton rope from the smokehouse, thin and strong, a glass vial from the medicine cabinet, empty and clean, a rusted iron key that fit the cellar door. She hid them beneath the floorboard under her bed, wrapped in an old rag. Each object had a purpose, each was chosen carefully. The Hartwell grandsons, Peter, age 6, and John, age 4, played in the yard behind the house during the afternoons. Their mothers watched from the porch, sipping lemonade, fanning themselves against the heat. Rachel brought them water in a clay pitcher, her movements slow and predictable. The children barely noticed her. To them, she was furniture, something that existed to serve, nothing more. One afternoon, Thomas called Rachel to the parlor. His wife, Margaret, sat in a chair by the window, her belly round with her third child. "Check her," Thomas said, gesturing. "She's been feeling poorly." Rachel knelt beside Margaret, pressed her hands gently against the woman's abdomen, felt the baby shift. "Baby's positioned well," Rachel said. "Strong heartbeat." Margaret looked at her with tired eyes. "You delivered my other two," she said. "I trust you, Rachel." Rachel nodded. Trust. The word hung in the air like smoke. That evening, Rachel went to the well. She lowered the bucket, heard it strike water far below, pulled it up hand over hand. The rope burned against her palms. She poured the water into the kitchen barrel, then lowered the bucket again. Each pull was a rehearsal. Each motion counted. She found Samuel again 2 nights later after the White family had gone to bed. He was smoking his pipe outside the quarters, the tobacco glow a small red eye in the darkness. "They're planning a baptism," Rachel said quietly. "Next Sunday, for the grandsons, in the creek behind the property." Samuel exhaled smoke. "That so?" "William says it's for show. The reverend's coming, the neighbors. They want people to see how godly they are." "And what does that mean for you?" Rachel looked toward the main house, its windows dark except for one upstairs lamp. "It means I have until Saturday to decide if I'm brave enough to do what needs doing." Samuel studied her. "You don't need bravery, Rachel. You need coldness. Can you be cold?" Rachel thought of Esther's face, the way it had looked in the wagon, turning back one last time before disappearing down the road. She thought of Thomas's laughter, William's sneer, the casual cruelty of men who owned other people and felt no shame. "I can be cold," she said. Chapter 3. The Quiet Witness. The days before the baptism moved like water, Inevitable, relentless. Rachel attended to her duties with the same precision she always had. She washed linens, prepared meals, mixed elderberry tea for Margaret's nausea, applied poultices to field hands' wounds. The plantation operated on its familiar rhythm: bells at dawn, work until dusk, prayers before sleep. But Rachel no longer prayed. On Thursday evening, she entered the main house to check on the grandsons before bed. The boys were in the nursery, their mothers reading them stories by candlelight. Peter, the older one, looked up when Rachel entered. "My mama says you're old as the hills," he said, not unkindly, just stating fact. "That's right," Rachel said. "Were you here when my papa was born?" "I was." The boy considered this. "Did you like him?" Rachel felt the mother's eyes on her. She smoothed the blanket over John's small body, tucked it around his shoulders. "I delivered him safe into this world," she said carefully. "That's what I was here to do." She left before anyone could ask more questions. In the hallway, she paused outside Thomas's study. Through the cracked door, she could hear him and William discussing next season's cotton yields, debating whether to sell off 3 field hands or keep them through winter. They spoke of human beings the way other men spoke of livestock, calculating value, weighing profit. Rachel descended the stairs, crossed the kitchen, and stood at the back door. The well waited in the moonlight, patient and dark. Saturday arrived with storm clouds gathering. The air felt heavy, electric. Rachel woke at dawn and began her preparations, not for the baptism, but for what would come after. She mixed laudanum into warm milk, measured twice to be certain. She checked the nursery door's latch, tested its weight. She walked to the well and looked down into the black water below, seeing nothing but her own dim reflection. That night, after the family finished supper and retired to their rooms, Rachel sat in her cabin holding the glass vial in her hands. It was small, delicate, capable of holding just enough liquid to quiet 2 small boys long enough for them to stop fighting. She thought about Peter asking if she'd liked his father. She thought about Esther, wherever she was now. If she was still alive, if she remembered her mother's face, if she'd borne children of her own into slavery. The decision had already been made. The act was simply what remained. She stood, placed the vial in her apron pocket, and walked toward the main house. The windows were dark. The cicadas screamed in the trees. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the fields like a promise. If you're still watching, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and how this story found you. Chapter 4. The Night of Silence. The storm broke just after midnight. Rain hammering the roof, wind shaking the windows, thunder splitting the sky. Rachel waited in the kitchen, listening to the house settle. Upstairs, the family slept through the noise, accustomed to summer storms, trusting the sturdy walls their wealth had built. Rachel moved through the darkness without a candle. She knew every step, every corner. Her bare feet made no sound on the floorboards. The vial in her pocket felt heavy as stone. She climbed the stairs slowly, pausing on each step to listen. Margaret's room was at the end of the hall, William's wife Catherine in the adjoining chamber. The nursery sat between them, a small room with 2 narrow beds, a washstand, a window that overlooked the well. The door was unlocked. Rachel entered, pulled it closed behind her. The boys slept deeply, their breathing soft and even. Peter lay on his side, one arm dangling off the bed. John curled tight beneath his blanket, his face peaceful in sleep. Rachel stood between the beds, looking at them in the darkness. They were children, innocent of their father's sins, born into privilege they didn't choose, would grow into the same cruelty if left to live. The logic of vengeance was simple. You strike where it hurts most. Thomas and William loved nothing, except perhaps these boys, their legacy, their proof of manhood. She uncorked the vial. The laudanum smelled bitter, medicinal. She knelt beside John's bed first, gently tilted his head, pressed the rim of the vial to his lips. The boy stirred but didn't wake, his mouth opening reflexively. She let 3 drops fall onto his tongue, then 4 more. He swallowed, coughed once, settled back into sleep. Peter woke when she touched him, his eyes opened, confused in the darkness. "Rachel." "Hush now," she whispered. "You're having bad dreams. Drink this. It'll help you sleep." The boy trusted her. Why wouldn't he? She'd always been there, always cared for him when he was sick, always brought him water when he cried out at night. He drank what she offered, grimaced at the taste, then lay back down. "Thank you," he murmured. Rachel waited. The laudanum worked quickly on children. Their small bodies couldn't fight it. Within 5 minutes, both boys breathed deep and slow, their limbs heavy, their minds submerged. They would not wake for hours. Would not wake at all if she followed through. She lifted John first. He was lighter than she expected, his body limp in her arms. She carried him down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the back door into the storm. Rain soaked her clothes immediately, plastered her hair to her skull. The well stood before her, its stone rim slick with water. She set John on the ground, grabbed the rope, tied it around his chest beneath his arms. The knot was tight, secure. She lifted him again, held him over the well's mouth, and let go. The rope caught. The boy's body swung against the stone wall, then hung suspended in the darkness. Rachel lowered him slowly, hand over hand, feeling the weight of him pulling against her tired muscles. The rope burned her palms. She didn't stop. Down and down until she heard the splash. Quiet beneath the thunder, final as a door closing. She pulled the rope up empty. Peter was heavier. Her arms shook as she carried him outside. The storm was louder now, the wind tearing at the trees. She repeated the process. Rope, knot, lift, release. His body disappeared into the well, the same way his brothers had. A small splash swallowed by darkness. Rachel stood at the well's edge, breathing hard, her hands bleeding where the rope had torn the skin. She looked up at the house. No lights. No movement. The storm had covered everything. She went back inside, washed her hands in the kitchen basin, dried them on her apron. The vial went into the stove. Glass and all, burned to nothing. She climbed the stairs, entered the nursery, unmade the beds to look like the boys had gotten up on their own. She opened the window, let the rain blow in. Then she returned to her cabin, changed into dry clothes, and lay on her bed. Her heart hammered. Her hands trembled, but her eyes stayed dry. She'd used all her tears 15 years ago, watching Esther disappear. Now there was only this, the cold, final arithmetic of revenge. Chapter 5. The Discovery. The screaming started at dawn. Rachel woke to Margaret's voice tearing through the morning air, wild and animal. She rose slowly, put on her day dress, walked to the main house. By the time she arrived, the family had gathered in the yard, Thomas and William in their nightshirts, their wives clutching each other, the house slaves standing at a distance with their faces carefully blank. "The boys," Margaret sobbed. "They're gone." The window was open. We thought they'd wandered outside, but... Thomas spun to face the assembled slaves. Who saw them? Who was awake last night? No one spoke. Rachel stood at the back of the group, hands folded, expression neutral. She'd perfected this look over 52 years. Present but invisible, hearing without listening, seeing without recording. William strode toward the well. "Check the outbuildings, the barn, the cellar." His voice cracked. "They have to be here. They're just hiding." The search lasted 3 hours. Every building, every shed, every corner of the property. Nothing. The boys had vanished. The storm had washed away any tracks, turned the yard to mud. Finally, someone thought to check the well. The rope was still there, coiled neatly on the ground where Rachel had left it. William lowered the bucket, felt it hit something solid too soon. He pulled it up. It came up empty, but the rope was wet. Not just from the storm, but from something else. Something that made him look down into that black throat with dawning horror. "Get the grappling hooks," he said, his voice hollow. They found Peter first, then John. The bodies emerged from the well like broken dolls, waterlogged and heavy, their nightshirts tangled around their legs. Margaret collapsed when she saw them. Catherine stood frozen, unable to scream, unable to move. Thomas fell to his knees in the mud. The overseer, a man named Crawford, immediately began questioning the slaves. Who was in the house last night? Who had access to the nursery? Rachel stepped forward. I checked on the boys before bed, sir. Same as always, they were sleeping sound. What time was that? Just after 8, before the storm. Crawford studied her face, looking for guilt, for nervousness, for anything that might betray knowledge. Rachel met his eyes calmly. She'd delivered his children too, nursed his wife through fever. He saw only the old woman he'd known for 20 years. Anyone else? The house slaves shook their heads. No one had seen anything. No one had heard anything. The storm had been too loud, the night too dark. Thomas stood slowly, his face pale. They drowned, he said, the words coming out flat, factual. They must have climbed out the window, gone to play by the well, and... He stopped, couldn't finish. In the middle of a storm, Crawford said, at night. Children do foolish things. But William wasn't convinced. He walked to where Rachel stood, his eyes red, his jaw tight. You put them to bed. You were the last one to see them alive. Rachel nodded. Yes, sir. Did you give them anything? To help them sleep? No, sir, they were tired from playing all day, went down easy. William wanted to accuse her. She could see it in his face, the rage, the need to blame someone, to make the pain make sense. But he had no proof, no witness, no reason beyond instinct, and instinct wasn't enough to hang a valuable slave. The Hartwell family buried the boys in the family cemetery, beneath 2 small stone markers. The Reverend spoke about God's mysterious ways. The neighbors brought food, offered condolences, whispered about tragic accidents and the dangers of wells. The slaves stood at a distance during the funeral, silent as stones, watching the White family weep. Rachel did not attend. She stayed in her cabin, preparing tonics for Margaret, who'd collapsed from grief and needed sedation. When Thomas brought her the herbs, his hands shook. My sons, he said, staring at nothing. My boys. Rachel measured the herbs carefully, mixed them with water. Grief is a heavy burden, she said quietly. Thomas looked at her. For a moment, something passed between them. Not understanding exactly, but recognition. The shape of loss. The weight of absence. You lost your daughter, he said. Yes, sir. Did it ever stop hurting? Rachel handed him the tonic. No, sir, she said. It never does. Chapter 6. The Price of Water. The plantation changed after the drowning. Margaret never recovered. She lost the child she'd been carrying 2 weeks later, her body surrendering to grief. Catherine moved back to her family's property in South Carolina, unable to look at the well, unable to sleep in a house that had swallowed her son. Thomas and William grew silent, their cruelty blunted by sorrow, though not extinguished. Rachel continued her work. She delivered 3 more babies that year, tended to fevers, mixed tonics, cleaned wounds. Her hands remained steady. Her face remained neutral. When people asked if she'd heard anything that night, the night of the storm, the night the boys died, and she said no. The thunder had been too loud. She'd slept through it all. Samuel found her one evening in late September, sitting outside her cabin as the sun set. He lowered himself onto the step beside her, his joints creaking. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the light fade across the fields. You did it, he said finally. Not a question. Rachel didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. Was it worth it? Rachel thought about Esther, about Peter asking if she'd liked his father, about the cold weight of small bodies, the sound of rope cutting into her palms, the endless black throat of the well. I don't know, she said. But it's done. They'll never prove it. No. But you'll carry it. Rachel looked at her hands, old, scarred, the skin thin as paper, These hands had brought 63 lives into the world. These hands had ended too. "I've carried worse," she said. The well was sealed a month later. Thomas had it filled with stones and earth, then covered with a flat piece of granite. No one drew water from it again. The family built a new well on the other side of the property, deeper, surrounded by a fence. But everyone remembered. The land remembered. The house remembered. Rachel lived another 8 years. She delivered 17 more children, including Thomas's final son, born to his second wife. She never spoke of that night, never confessed, never showed remorse or satisfaction. When she died in 1851, the Hartwell family gave her a proper burial in the slave cemetery, a wooden cross marking the grave. The Reverend called her faithful. The white family called her a loss. The other slaves knew better. They understood what Rachel had done, even if it was never spoken aloud. They understood that sometimes justice comes not through the law or through mercy, but through the cold, patient hands of someone who remembers, who refuses to forget, who chooses the moment and takes it, regardless of cost. The well remained sealed. But on quiet nights when the wind blew through the old plantation grounds, people said they could hear water moving beneath the stone. A reminder that some debts are paid in silence, some acts of defiance are never erased, and some people refuse to carry their burdens without setting them down, however dark the water, however deep the fall. If this story kept you holding your breath, hit like. It helps us bring more forgotten histories back to life.